So anybody that says like, "Oh, the first time I went up, I killed," they're fucking lying. You know what? Those people are they're the people that go, "Oh, tattoos, they don't hurt. It just feels like a bee sting and then it goes numb." No, it fucking doesn't. It hurts the entire time, you fucking idiot.
Hey, welcome to episode 12 of the Codec Projects podcast. This week we're talking to Bill Conway. Bill is one of the founding members of the hardtimes.net. He's also a stand-up comedian, and he's just launched a new podcast called Vert Button. They get in a lot of detail about old skate videos. We talk about growing up in skateboarding and going to hardcore shows in Massachusetts, getting into doing stand-up comedy, the Edgeland podcast, starting up the Hard Times, working at Dunkin Donuts, and a lot more. I think you'll enjoy this one.
I am Bill Conway, and I am the editor-in-chief / co-founder of the Hard Times satire news site.
Okay. That's an impressive position. I definitely want to get to how you got there, but first I need to mention that we have some things in common. I think we both grew up in Massachusetts.
That is correct.
We both grew up skateboarding.
That is correct.
We both grew up going to hardcore shows.
That is correct.
We're both straight edge.
That is correct.
You're
straight edge adults at this point, which is even, stranger.
It is stranger. So, and that's kind of how, let's see, I think that's the way we came to know each other, because I'm just a tad bit older than you. So I don't think we ever really crossed paths skateboarding or even at shows. I don't know. Did we ever cross paths at shows?
No, my first show that I went to probably wasn't until like the year 99, 2000. And it was like a ska show. So I didn't start like going to like hardcore shows in earnest until the early 2000s.
Yeah, I wouldn't have been at a ska show. No way, man.
Yeah. No, you weren't at the Big D and the Kids Table show at the C Note in Hull?
I was not, but I did see, let's see, I played with, what was that band? Oh my God.
Kicked in the Head?
No. They had, it was like, I think they had two singers and a turntable, very similar to a Beck line in a Beck song, but, yeah, it was one of those bands. They were down from that area, and they definitely had turntables and multiple singers.
Oh, that's dope.
I can't remember the name of the band. They were actually really nice guys, I think.
You have to be a nice guy if you're gonna try to pull off that kind of bullshit. It's just like you better be really cool. Otherwise, because that's like not acceptable.
It was a different time, I think. Also.
Yeah, there was room for experimentation at that point.
But also, so the straight edge thing. So that's how we started talking, because you used to do a podcast called Edgeland.
Yes.
Actually, you know what? Before I mention that, I want to find out, how did you start skateboarding? Like, what was that? What was that about?
So I grew up in the small town of Hanson, Massachusetts, which is about 40 minutes south of Boston on the South Shore, and there's a lot of it's a very wooded town, in between Hanson and the town next to it, Halifax, there's this little, like almost like unincorporated type of town. It's called Monpont. It's got its own little post office, but it used to be all old vacation homes for people that weren't quite wealthy enough to live on Cape Cod, but wanted to live near a lake, which Monpont had, and then the lake got like toxic or something like that, and so the wealthy people moved out and left their vacation homes behind, and then poor people like my family moved into those houses. So we rented there, and it was a lot of neighborhood kids, and my neighbor just happened to have this giant plastic skateboard, and the neighborhood kids, we'd all just fight over who gets to push around the neighborhood, and I just enjoyed it the most. And eventually, I don't know how I ended up, and my older cousin also skateboarded, so he was like a little bit of an older brother to me, so the fact that I saw him doing it, and then I was already using this piece of shit plastic thing, somehow I got my hands on a CCS catalog, and then for my 12th birthday I got my first complete, which was a Powell ripper, not like the classic shape, but like your standard nose and tail from the 90s. So it was a reissue, but the Powell Ripper slick, probably with some Venter trucks and some matching wheels on there, and the cheapest bearings possible that rusted if you breathed near them.
Nice. They still made what year was that? Because I thought they stopped making slicks in like the early 90s, but maybe they redid them. Or
this would have been 96, and I don't think they were popular then. They were like $10 more expensive to get a slick.
Yeah.
And I thought like, oh, I should get a slick because it will help board slides. And I don't know why I thought that, since I couldn't ollie, and therefore I could not board slide. So I don't know why I thought I needed a slick. All that really happened was I chunked up the bottom of it and it became sharp from the plastic. So, it would like, you'd pick up your board and it would just like kind of cut you a little bit because you tried to like ollie onto over a cinder block or something, and then just chewed up the bottom of the graphic.
Yeah, I probably had two slicks, like Santa Cruz slicks, when they first came out, I think like 91 or something. And they did help you slide, but they seemed to just get, like after about a week, they seemed just to get mushy, like they lost all their pop.
Yeah, I think so. I live in LA now, and I skate a couple of these like slappy curb spots that like some dudes, they can just, they're magicians on these double-sided ledges, but a lot of these, if you don't have rails, a lot of the guys have like these new slick technology boards, that are just like, it's a different level of slick where like, it's just like formed into the wood a little bit and doesn't get worn down, and it's like, no, skateboard technology has progressed. But I'm still just rocking your standard 7 plies and piece of a little bit of paint on the bottom. I haven't fully committed to the curb lifestyle yet.
I think once you go that way, I was talking about someone the other day. I was talking to my friend Vern. Do you know Vern Laird?
I had him on Edgeland, but we haven't linked up since I've been in LA.
Okay, because I was talking to him, and he was skating with some dudes, and they were teaching him like basically if you get fully into that, you got to put rails on because it helps with the leverage so you can go from like board to like hurricane and all those like on and off your from truck to rail type things.
Right. Yes, they're just like dancing on top of the ledge.
Yeah, exactly. Which is probably more my speed these days if I could find a rail in the woods of a curb in the woods of New Hampshire.
You're gonna have to steal a bunch of parking blocks and just lay them next to each other.
Oh, we used to do that for hours. Just like set up all these just different parking block configurations.
Imagine how confusing that is for somebody like just like a standard person that like works at like a tire shop, and then like they come in on the weekend and all their parking blocks are like pushed together. And I'm like, who the fuck did this?
Yeah, because there was a parking garage in my town where I grew up in North Andover, and we could get in there and it wasn't locked off, and we get in there in the winter and we take all the, we would take like 6 parking blocks and just push them together, make in different contraptions, and it probably did. If they didn't know what was going on, it's like coming across Stonehenge or something. Like aliens landed and reconfigured the parking blocks.
I was walking with a friend of mine just along the LA River, and there's like a nice little river walk, and there was marks on the wall from people trying to wall ride like a concrete wall, and I just like asked him, I was like, do you notice things like that? Like just, and he's like, no, I would never think of that. Like, what is that? And just like, well, it's somebody trying to wall ride this because there's a little bit of cutout on the wall, so they're trying to get over. Like, skateboarders see everything, and if I don't know how to turn that off, and I'm glad I have it, but I almost wish I could spend a day in somebody's head that didn't have it just to see how much different the world looks.
Dude, I think about that sometimes because I've gone through periods in my life where I haven't skated or rode because I obviously I ride BMX bikes too, and like you look at things very similar in a similar way every time you see a ledge or a rail, or you notice something that's been waxed or a skate stopped. And it's like, I think about, but I go through periods of my life where maybe I haven't done that stuff in a while, but you can't not see it. And I just wonder if one day they're going to be bringing me into the hospital for on my final voyage on the gurney, and I'm just going to look over and see some like rail and just, I mean, you can't not think about that. Like you see it, someone's skate, it's all waxed up. And then you go in and that's like your last thought. But how did you get into going to shows, hardcore shows and stuff?
So that same cousin that skateboarded a little bit. So it's kind of weird when I think back timeline wise. So I was in 6th grade and I think he was 2 or 3 grades above me. So he seemed much cooler. When he was a senior, I was a freshman. So that was our age difference. But there was a brief window where he was into really cool stuff. Like he skateboarded, and at the time Victory Records wasn't as maligned as it is now. Like, you know, if you got like the Victory Style Part 1 sampler, like it was pretty sick. And he was listening to bands off of that and like Warzone and stuff like that. And he was introducing me to that sort of music. And also I was just naturally at that age getting the heavier music that was played on the radio, which was like Korn and the first Korn records. So I'm gravitating towards heavier stuff, but then I'm introduced to better, heavier stuff through him. But his window of being into cool stuff like that lasted like 2 weeks. And he went in like the opposite direction, I feel like, where he was listening to like only new metal and stuff like that, and like Seven Dust would be his favorite band or something like that, and it's just like, oh, I'm out, and I guess I don't look up to you that much anymore. See you at family gatherings. And a friend of mine, and I guess from there I started to get skate videos, and so, you know, you're getting magazines that mention like cool bands. You got the skate videos that have cool bands, and then I'm finding the starter pack of my punk, your Minor Threat, your Dead Kennedys, your Black Flags, and you know, getting those records. But my friend Scott played drums in a lot of kind of metalcore and hardcore bands, and I'd always just go to shows with him. He was in a band called like Draw Blood. There was the Automata, where they were like a metalcore band with a lot of mosh parts. And so because that was the style at the time, I think after 10 Yard Fight broke up, I think moshcore became, once you guys broke up, then it just opened the doors for a different sort of hardcore, because you guys weren't there anymore. So I'm going to blame a lot of the, a lot of that metalcore stuff, not on like the influence that came from Cave-In and people just trying to rip them off, but the fact that you guys weren't there anymore. That's what I'm going to say.
I blame the fact that Converge wouldn't call it quits. They just kept going.
I think you're right.
But okay, yeah, that makes sense. That definitely makes sense. And shit, I almost had the name of that turntable band, and it was right on the tip of my tongue, and I lost it. I'll think of it before the end of this, I think. Let's see. So after that, you just naturally became a stand-up comedian, right? Is that how that worked?
Stand-up didn't come until a lot later. Like, it's one of those things. I was actually talking with a friend of mine about this the other day, and I don't know if this is similar to something in your life or how relatable this is to people, but you know, I grew up in a working class town in Massachusetts where my parents' dreams for me were become an electrician, a licensed electrician, and become a licensed plumber, so I could have 2 contractor's licenses and I could set my price.
That's good money, like, man.
Yeah, that was their whole logic. Completely ignoring like that. It's like teachers would be like, oh, he's a talented writer or something like that. Right. And being like, maybe he should pursue some sort of arts or something like that. So that sort of thing never creeped into my mind. So it was all skateboarding, and kind of, I was a decent student, but didn't care for studiousness. And I ended up moving to San Francisco when I was 26, 27. And while I was working in a warehouse there, I was listening to Mark Maron's WTF podcast. And one of the comedians that was on there was just talking about how he was working in a warehouse loading trucks, and he could make as much money doing stand-up in a weekend as he was doing loading trucks, as I was working in a warehouse loading trucks. I was like, well, I might as well give it a try. I've been thinking about this literally for all my life, so why don't I try stand-up comedy? And it was at the time when podcasts were kind of new, and a lot of it was like, there's just practical advice on these podcasts of go to an open mic and just try it out. And so that's where stand-up was, and I guess this would technically be my 10th year of stand-up, and I have not made enough money in stand-up to like I would be broke right now if I relied on stand-up money. But stand-up is tough. It's a crowded field, but it's certainly been rewarding because it's led me to the other things like podcasting in the hard times.
Right, and I would imagine I'm sure it can be difficult, but I would think it would be a good time. I mean, maybe scary and often shitty, but still overall a good time.
Yeah, it's definitely one thing, being a straight edge guy, like a lot of times you go to an open mic or you're doing a stand-up comedy show and you bomb and it's just so bad, but you don't, like, your friends, they bomb and they're just like, oh, I'm going to go get drunk and wash this away. I'm like, oh, I'm going to let this stew inside of me and rot me from the inside out. Yeah. That's how I feel about this. And it's just like, that's where, like, I'm always glad that I'm straight edge, but I almost wish there was a straight edge way of cleansing that awful feeling from you, because bombing stand up is terrible. There are times, where people wanted to fight me. There's, times where it's just so embarrassing that you're like, oh, I'll never show my face in public again. This was cool.
I think that's maybe just listen to Earth Crisis after.
That's usually what I did. Was I would put on Firestorm. I'd like put it on like a boombox and on the bus, and then just mosh at people and see what happened.
Do you mind tell me about your first stand-up experience, or is that too painful?
Oh, no.
Maybe it was great. I don't know.
It did not go well, but
I've never heard of one that did go well, honestly.
So anybody that says like, oh, the first time I went up, I killed, they're fucking lying. Yeah. You know what? Those people are, they're the people that go, oh, tattoos, they don't hurt. It just feels like a bee sting and then it goes numb. No, it fucking doesn't. It hurts the entire time, you fucking idiot. But my first stand up, I can actually figure out what the date was. I remember the first week I did stand up was the week Steve Jobs died. Wow. Because so that was actually 9 years ago this year. So
I was going to say, was that 10 years ago already?
Yeah, so that was 2011, October 5th, 2011. So I probably did stand up for the first time like October 7th. And the only reason I remember this is because I went to the open mic. It was at the Brainwash Cafe in San Francisco. And a lot of comedians, if you came from the Bay Area, you did the open mic at Brainwash. The host of it was Tony Sparks. He's the godfather of Bay Area comedy. Like, you would know a lot of names that have come through that place when they were nobodies, like Ali Wong. That was like her home base originally. She went through Brainwash, and obviously Ali Wong is one of the most recognized stand-ups there is these days. And if you actually listen closely to her stand-ups, you can tell that she was like kind of like she has the whole bit about dating skateboarders, and you can just tell it comes from being a woman that dated skateboarders, specifically in San Francisco, where everybody's broke and lives on air mattresses. But so my first time, I think I went to 3 or 4 open mics and didn't go up. I just wanted to see what it was like. And the amount of people that went up that were so bad that I was like, well, if they're trying it, then surely I cannot be that bad. And they are delusional enough to try this. So, I wrote out like 5 minutes of material, and then I would just like mumble it around at work and try to memorize like every little bit of it. And my only modest goal was like, I don't even need to get laughs. I just don't want to forget my act, thinking that this 3 minutes was an act. I was like, I just don't want to forget what I want to say. I don't want to bring notes up there. I just want to try to get through it. And I probably went up like third to last. The people that were working at the cafe were like putting the stools up, and the host already had one foot out the door basically, and just like, I don't want to be here. But earlier in that night, somebody went up and they're doing their thing, and then they freeze, they forget their material, and they just like, oh, I don't know what I want to say, and then they just sit there, and the host is like, well, say something or leave. And so I was like, wow, somebody actually forgot what we're gonna say. And then the show goes on, and then it happened to somebody else. So I saw two people on my first night completely freeze and forget what they wanted to say. And that was the only thing I didn't want to do. And I have not seen that happen since on that level. Like sometimes people will forget a little bit and then they'll move on. But two people completely froze up and just basically left the stage in silence.
Pretty sure that would be me.
Yeah.
If I ever tried it.
But by the time I went up, it was so low stakes because there was nobody there, and it was just me nervously mumbling through some bad material that I really don't even remember what it was, and I'm probably glad that I don't remember what it was and that I can't find those notebooks because it would probably be embarrassing to look back on. But it was one of those things like you do it and then it's like, all right, we'll come back next week and we'll see it. We'll try it again. But for my first year of comedy, I only did it once a week until like somebody's like, no, you got to do it like 7 times a week. You got to be out every night. I was like, what? So that's
got your
when
reps.
That's when it started to become a little bit more serious. And then I moved up to Portland after, doing 2 years of stand-up comedy in San Francisco, and then kind of just like started over again. Like, what little goodwill I had built up, it's like, all right, let's throw it away and move to a new city, because that's always a smart thing to do.
Yeah, I was gonna say, what's Portland like for stand-up?
It was actually a pretty good scene, especially when I got there in like 2013-ish. There was a lot of talented people, because there's certain comedy cities that are feeder cities. Like if you end up in New York or Los Angeles, that's like, you better have material because you want to be able to present it, and you're looking for a job at this point in comedy. So you want to get your reps in feeder cities like Portland, Denver, Austin, or something like that, and where they have good comedy scenes and very funny people, and they have a couple of clubs that you can get hired at if necessary. But what's up?
Sorry, I was just gonna say, I'm surprised you never. So Boston's like notoriously a good, from what Joe Rogan tells me, anyways. Because that's really where I get my comedy scene information.
Of course, yeah.
No, but I mean, source. Boston's pretty famous for its comedy scene, or it was in years past. I'm surprised that wasn't kind of something that you started on the East Coast.
That goes back to the earlier thing of never getting that encouragement or even knowing where to start, like never having that. If I had one friend, that maybe had done stand-up while I was there in Boston, then I might have been like, oh shit, that's the path. But there was nothing. One of my friends ended up starting to do stand-up. Sorry, my wife is calling me. Even though I clearly told her that I would be busy. So, there's a divorce coming. Yeah.
If you need to pick it up, you can pick it up.
Let me just... I'm text her real quick. Oh my God, are you calling me again? Yeah.
The nerve.
Okay. So when I lived, even growing up in Massachusetts, I didn't know a single person that did anything other than work for, the city and, pound asphalt into potholes or something like that. Like that was like the dream job, is to work for the city.
Right. Did you go to many comedy shows like until you started looking into doing the open mics? Were you going before that?
I remember in Boston, there was, maybe it was at Nick's Comedy Stop, that I had a friend of a friend who was doing an open mic sort of thing, and we went to it, but he was so bad, and like the friends that I was with, like they ripped him so much after it that it kind of was like, oh, shit, like, okay, maybe this isn't it, it was like a bad experience as far as what comedy is concerned, instead of an inspiring one. But when I lived in Allston, like there was open mics at like a couple of cafes, and I didn't really even realize what they were. It's just like, who are these dorks? So I wish I had paid more attention, but being in your early 20s and thinking you're a cool hardcore guy that skateboards, like you kind of aren't paying attention to anything else, because you just want to go to the ICC church to see Suicide File play and then skate the Jackson Man after, or something like that. But Yeah, Boston is a good comedy town for sure.
I
I
know.
just
Yeah.
didn't fuck with it while I was there.
No, I hear you. I understand. Sometimes things just don't. It depends what phase of your life you're in.
Yeah.
Uh, but so as far as let's see, did you just obviously when you were doing stand up you started writing. I'm guessing you were writing jokes. Were you writing it all before that, or like for other different things? Because how did you start writing? Because you did with the hard times. You originally you were like you and I'm guessing Matt were basically the writers, right? Is that
Yeah. So I really comedy stand up was like the first creative outlet, of putting things out in the world. And then through that, like I would do Edgeland and I'd try to do, you
right?
know, different sort of comedy bits in the intros or whatever. And when I was doing Edgeland, I was really only 3 years into comedy,
Okay.
but then the hard times came around that 3 years into comedy, and Matt had this background in journalism, and I had some experience doing this joke writing thing, and he would write like a draft, and I would see what he was doing and be like, oh, you're actually leading with like the strongest joke and then they get weaker as your draft goes on. Like you should start with the less funny, like make it funny at the top, but get stronger as it goes down. So people are continually interested in reading and they're rewarded by this
Right.
instead of reading the best joke and then being like, well, the rest of that was a waste of my fucking time. And so his knowledge of journalism and how AP style was structured and my budding comedy writing worked together well because we were able to craft that voice. And I loved The Onion. Like when I
Yeah.
lived in San Francisco was one of the few towns that had hard copies of The Onion in, newsstands. And so every Tuesday I would, on my way to work, I would grab a couple copies of The Onion to read. And when the day that they stopped printing those was like a devastating day for me, but I still have the 4 or 5 anthologies of all the Onion articles of certain years sitting on my shelf right now. So like that voice was just kind of like ingrained inside of me, I guess.
Right. So yeah, you mentioned Edgeland. We should probably back up to that a bit. So that's basically sounds like that was your first go at sort of mixing the two hardcore and comedy together. How did you start? Like why and how did you start doing Edgeland?
Yeah, so I started doing Edgeland. So at no point have I ever been a musician. At no point have I ever done anything. Like, there's a certain maybe this is a thing a lot of people think about, but when you come up through punk and hardcore, it's such a communal place. Like you get a lot from it and you give back to it in a little bit of ways. And like Edgeland was the closest thing I could do to think to give back to punk and hardcore from what I've taken. Like, oh, I'll do interviews with straight edge people. Like that's the closest I'm going to be able to do for this, since I can't play in a band that people might like because I do not have any musical talent.
Well,
so we'll see.
That's when you sing.
Yeah. Nobody wanted that either. I sent a cappella demo tapes out across the country and never got a single bite. I don't know why, but Edgeland came out mainly because of being a stand-up comic and just trying to continue to do other creative things. Like I didn't want to put all my eggs in just the stand-up basket. Wanted to try and get some other reps and use it as an excuse to talk to people in the bands that I grew up listening to and that influenced me in certain ways, so I wanted to get the insights, and I figured instead of just doing a podcast that I wanted it to be specific, you know? So, like, if there's one thing that I know, it is being straight edge. So I would like to hear other people and why they are straight edge, and let's find out why people broke edge. Let's get to the down and dirty of it. And most people very open about talking about that sort of thing. Some people might not think that they would want to, but people want to talk about themselves, and sometimes they can make an excuse for it and feel better about it, because I do think there's still like a shame that goes along with like breaking edge, you know?
Yeah, no, I'd agree. And I think it's, I was surprised at how many people, like, it didn't seem like you had trouble getting people on to talk for that portion of it, which I would have thought you'd have a lot more difficulty. Is there any like stories about, you know, like, you know, basically you needed to kind of twist some people's arms to get them on or talk about it, or were they just mostly pretty ready to go?
So for the people that were straight edge, it was an easy sell,
right?
You know, the people that weren't straight edge, I kind of had to, like, when I reached out to him, and a lot of times is like, say I had a guest on, like say you were on, maybe I even asked you, I was like, hey, do you know anybody that used to be straight edge that I might not think about that was like straight edge? I'd be like, oh yeah, the bass player of Reach the Sky was straight edge, you know, you should reach out to him. And then I would find out who that was, you know.
Yeah.
I never had him on the podcast. I don't know his name, maybe you do, but
at one point it was LaCroix, so yeah, you had
okay.
him.
Hey, I did have him on. What do you know? But so I would just find out people that way. And then, you know, just growing up in Massachusetts hardcore, where straight edge at that time was like a big deal, and then it wasn't a big deal anymore. So there was a lot of edge breaking to go around. And but yeah, I would just ask them and be like, hey, this is not a judgment thing. It's more of a, what is your experience with hardcore through the lens of straight edge? And we can get to that. And I think a lot of people had kind of the same idea about straight edge. Like, even if they weren't straight edge anymore, it's like, I'm glad I was straight edge, because it taught me this restraint that even though I had like maybe a couple dark years, that I knew I could pull out of it and get to a point of like moderation, or maybe being straight edge from age 18 to 23 saved me from the darkest times. And so people still looked fondly back on being straight edge, you know, with some distance in between it. Cause I'm sure, you know, when they first broke edge, that they had some friends that were like, you fucking sell out, get the hell out of here. You're not allowed in this scene anymore, or whatever.
Right. Yeah. I've always found that, that most people, it maybe not initially, like, I think a lot of, especially if they're younger, when they broke edge, like, when initially they might have been kind of like real, like, they went completely the opposite direction and were like, fuck straight edge kids. But as they got older, and if people broke when they were older, then they were just kind of like, yeah, man, I still respect it. I still think it's awesome. It's just not for me anymore. Like much more kind of, and they like a much more mature attitude about it, and also respected it, and really, like you said, were thankful that they experienced it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's accurate. There was maybe only one or two people that kind of had like a complete, like, yeah, fuck straight edge, that whole thing is stupid. Then I kind of just like, why are you doing this interview, man? You know, like, why did you agree to this? You know, it's kind of weird. But that was rare. And it got to the point with Edgeland. I mean, I did it for like 3 years and like 110 episodes or something like that. And the finding people that were straight edge and finding people that were not straight edge was getting to be such a, you know, hassle, like that. It was just like, oh, I've reached out to all these people. And, you know, there was one person that played in a lot of bands. I'll just list the bands. I won't say his name, and you'll know who it is. He played in Carry On. He played in Blacklisted. He currently plays in Nails, and he basically said that he would sue me if I kept emailing him. You know, like, and that he was gonna like find me and beat the shit out of me. But the funny thing is, if you read our email exchanges, it was very polite and to be like, hey, this is the thing. It's a no judgment thing. Would you want to be on? He's like, oh, not a good time for me. Maybe reach out again in 6 months and I will reconsider. And so then I reached out again in 6 months and it was like, I don't know who told you to email me, but if you keep doing this, I will contact a lawyer. And it was like, and then I just like, direct yourself to the previous message that you sent me where you said reach out again in 6 months. Like, what the fuck is your problem, man?
You can answer or not, but did this individual also play in Betrayed?
Yes, sir.
So, because I'm not aware, is he not straight edge anymore?
From my understanding, he is not, and
Okay.
that is why he was combative.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Because I know. All right, let's not talk too much about it. But I've had some different experience. He was always cool with me, and like, I like this individual, but I know he had some different feelings on straight edge over the years. So I mean, whatever. We'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Hopefully, he's doing well.
And that's why I wanted to talk to people who had differing opinions. It wasn't like, I would like to hear the people that say like, fuck it, sometimes, it wasn't going to convince me otherwise, but I also am straight edge. I don't know, if straight edge wasn't a word, I'd still be straight edge, like that's just my default setting. And so it's never been like, it's like the most important thing to me. It's the strangest thing.
I'm kind of the same way. I feel the same way. Sometimes I feel guilty because it's not hard for me in any sense. It's just the way I always have been. And I just, and I'm not trying to say that in a, bragging way or anything. It's just like, I respect a lot of times when people struggle with it and it's hard for them. I respect that a lot more because it's difficult. What I'm doing is not difficult. It's just me.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that means, but I relate to what you're saying.
There was one interview that I always tried to get, which was another individual who was involved in the coining of the term straight edge. You might be able to guess who this is. Would not come on the podcast, who's very open, and communicative when you reach out to him, even after all these years, and seems to be a great guy. But I did talk to him off the record in a phone call trying to pitch him to be on the show. And I was explaining to him that like, yeah, I'm straight edge, but even if this term didn't exist, I'd still be straight edge. He's like, that's how I am. And so I kind of got the idea like, he is still straight edge. Got it.
Yeah. He's got to be, I can imagine who you're talking about. I'm guessing he's absolutely got to be sick and tired of talking about the subject at this point.
Yeah. I think so.
Did he give a reason why he didn't want to? Was that the reason, or is he?
Yeah, it basically boiled down to I don't get what the point of having me on the show is because I am not straight edge. Like I do not identify as straight edge.
Okay,
it's just how I am. And it's just like I get it. That, and I could see how if you were part of this person that just named a song and then it spun into something completely out of control in your eyes, especially like what hardcore became or whatever,
right?
Then you might have a sour taste in your mouth, like, oh, I helped create a monster, so.
Right. I hear you. So move it. So from Edgeland, and you were already doing stand up, and somehow you hooked up with Matt. How did that come about?
Matt was on the podcast initially. He was like pretty early on in the podcast. He played in a straight edge band called Zero Progress out of the Bay Area, and I remember it was like when Tumblr was really popular, and I kept remember seeing his Tumblr like pop up like all the time. Like, who is this guy? I wasn't even on Tumblr that much. I don't know. It's like pre-Instagram, and so it must have just been like on, I don't know, Facebook or something. That I don't remember how the internet worked before the current internet, but I just remember that I kept seeing him pop up in conversations like, oh, he's doing this character, he's like this hardcore front man that's basically being a professional wrestler, but he's straight edge and he's trying to piss people off, and I found it funny.
That does sound pretty funny.
Yeah, it was good. It was just a professional wrestler shtick, and he was the bad guy. He was the Ric Flair type, and trying to piss people off. And so I had him on the podcast, and we were friendly enough. Like we didn't become like instant best friends or anything, but we stayed in contact through Facebook. And then one day in like November 2014, or maybe like October 2014, he just made a post like, hey, I'm thinking about starting like a satire site, kind of like The Onion for punks. Anybody interested? And I just commented on it like, yes, I will be in touch. And like I wrote like 100 headlines in like 2 days, and then just emailed him. I was like, this is what we should do. Let's pick out some of these headlines and let's go. And so him and I, just from that moment, so it wasn't like he reached out to me specifically, but it was just like, I see what you want to do. Let's do this. And him and I are broken people that can't stop working ever. So we were able to create a pretty good relationship from there, and build out the hard times slowly but surely. And then people started. It was never meant to be anything people really saw. It was supposed to be like 5 of our friends would see it, and then be like, all right, yeah, that's decent. And then 6 months later, we'd move on to the next thing. And that was a fun little writing exercise. But it started to get traction pretty early on.
Yeah,
like
no.
There was.
Yeah.
What's up?
I was going to say it definitely did, because I remember when you started posting about it pretty early on. I was like, oh, that's the dude that did Edgeland. Because I think I had been on the show already at that. Because you started, did they overlap at all, or was it totally after Edgeland was done? Because I feel like it overlapped.
It overlapped by about probably like a year and a half.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm trying to think. Let's see.
Because I feel like you were still doing it, but I feel like I had been on, and then I saw it pop up, and I saw you post about it, and I recognized, because we were Facebook friends or whatever. But, anyways, I don't know.
Yeah, let's see. Actually, so you were on episode 30 of Edgeland, which would have been May 29th, 2014. So Hard Times started in December 2014. Okay. So,
because I remember, I think you were sort of fresh on my radar as far as, new people, you know what I mean?
Right.
Sometimes, when you start to have a new Facebook friend or whatever, like, I don't know. I remember being like, oh, what's this dude doing? And it seemed like it took off pretty fast. Was that an idea that like, had you thought of doing anything like that beforehand? Or was it just like he had the idea, and as soon as you heard it, it would just instantly like clicked with you?
Yeah, so Matt had done like a satirical zine that like ran for like 1 or 2 issues in college that like, nobody cared about. And then when he had the idea, and I mean, if you could have asked me back then, like my comedy goal would have been like writing for The Onion, like that would have been the ultimate success story if I could have done that. So this sort of thing was like, oh, this is perfect practice or whatever for when The Onion comes calling. They're going to be knocking down my door any day now once they see my submission packet. So that was not the end goal by any means, but certainly it was just like, I feel like I'm cut out for this, like this is something that I could do. And him and I were able to have a pretty good working relationship, and we had similar goals. And when we saw that people were actually reacting to it, and inspired us to keep going and trying to build it out even more. But like, I remember that first Christmas, like we had a article making fun of like the new Black Flag record that just came out, like that What the album, or whatever the fuck that was called. And Ron Reyes, the singer on that album, shared the article that was like making fun of it. And
wow.
Like on Facebook, I was like, this is crazy, like how does he know about this, and then I remember seeing other Facebook friends just like sharing the articles and being like, if this is true, this is fucked up, and be like, you saw me share that earlier, right? Like, and you're already believing this is true. Like one of the early articles was like Henry Rollins starts third Black Flag. So, and people were like sharing that, like, come on, Henry, what are you doing here? And that's awesome. Just like, no, it's guys, it's a joke. Like read the article. Like it's clearly. But then it goes back to I feel like a lot of people don't get satire sometimes. Like still to this day, they read things at face value, and it's just crazy to me.
Well, that's the best part about it, when people actually think it's real. I mean, that's a lot of times funnier than the joke. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I mean, not to be a dick, but sometimes laughing at how stupid people are is just as funny, if not funnier, than the actual article.
Yeah, if I could handle the comments section sometimes, then it would be funny to go down there and just see the people that are reacting to things at face value. But for the most part, I stay away from comment sections altogether because they're just a cesspool.
That's a good idea. I have to say, the one thing you said about, the Onion and the Hard Times, and I think what I love about what you guys are doing is I just love when anyone takes, so to preface this, I think, everyone wants to be original or whatever, but I think originality is just kind of like, first of all, to be original these days, it's just like, it's almost impossible. Like almost everything's been done. I mean, I'm sure you've seen the whole everything's remix video or whatever that was going around years ago, or maybe not. But I mean, the whole idea is that everything at this point has got to be a mashup, and if you want any sort of sense of originality. But coming from like skateboarding and hardcore and like the kind of DIY side of things, anytime I see when someone takes something that's more mainstream and like makes the hardcore version of it or the skateboarding version of it, like I love that, because it's just like, do it as well as the mainstream version that's being done, but with the slant of hardcore or skateboarding. Like that's everything that I've ever tried to kind of do has been that sort of thing. None of it's been successful as what you guys have done. But even like, if you think of like, Jesus, even like 411 Video Magazine, really, that's what they were trying to do. Or especially like On Video Magazine, like they were doing it was like a one of those like Entertainment Tonight type fucking things, but about skateboarding and just a little bit less cheesy. So like it's a brilliant move, and the fact that, but what you guys ended up doing, like the fact that it was like based in punk but sort of transcended into the mainstream is like blows me away. You know what I mean? Because usually that just sort of stays in those worlds. They make it big, but they don't usually, like, you didn't see, like, you never saw, like, the dad, like this fucking, like a soccer mom or something watching 411 just for the hell of it. But they're definitely sharing Hard Times articles. You know what I mean? Like, I don't even know how they understand some of them, but they get shared like crazy. Does that surprise you, or?
It still surprises me, like, because I mean it's so often, I'm lucky enough to have the Hard Times be my full-time job these days. That's been my full source of employment and income for like 18 months now, where the first 4.5 years it was basically losing money and just a slog of working in a warehouse for 10 hours and then trying to find time to work on this where my wife won't divorce me, as I'm trying to be like, no, I have to write a joke about Jello Biafra. You don't understand. Like, this is important. And so when I see people share it or say that, there was a kid that came up to me after a comedy show saying, like, he seemed like nervous, It was just like, oh, I can't believe I'm getting to meet you. I was like, well, what are you talking about? Like, I'm just a fucking loser, like, oh, my friends and I, all we do is share Hard Times articles. I was like, that's amazing. Like, that's so cool to hear, because I didn't expect that, so I'm glad people enjoy it. I'm glad people interact with it. And it is surprising to me that it's still carries on 6 years in at this point, that people are it's still gaining popularity. It seems like we're still growing on social media, and despite the crackdowns on fake news that has pervaded, satire gets scooped into that area, the Russian hacks and stuff like that. has affected traffic in a way, but we're still able to power through that.
How does that affect what you guys do then? Is it just like do you have to write things differently, or is like, how does that work?
We've always just put out the product and then just tried to, inform people to the best of our abilities. Like, hey, mark this as a favorite on Facebook so you see it in your feed, or else they're not going to show it to you. So, and not a lot of people do that, but it's all organic reach. We've never paid for likes or shares or anything like that, because we never had the money to do that, and it always just seemed cheap and cheesy to us. Like, you won't see on Instagram like a sponsored Hard Times post pop up in your feed for like a joke about Henry Rollins or something like that. It's just, that's corny. But it's constantly a surprise, and thankfully we have enough of a fan base at this point, I guess, that it kind of fights through that. And I mean, we are seeing different things, like the crackdown on Facebook for like hate groups and stuff like that. Like, if we have like an online pitch group on Facebook and somebody pitched a headline that mentioned Screwdriver, and Facebook deleted that post in the the pitch group.
In the private group?
Yes, in the private group.
Wow.
They said it violated their terms on dangerous individuals. And I was like, well, interesting, that finally they figured out that Screwdriver is a white power band. Good job, Facebook. But also, did you read the context that this is? It wasn't saying, hey, just checked out the Screwdriver album, think they got a lot of good ideas. It was, making fun of Screwdriver.
Right.
And so, this blanket thing that they do is kind of stupid in the long run, but I get what they're doing. It's
right.
Probably better to lose a couple of well-intentioned posts to get rid of thousands of completely vile posts.
Right. No, I agree. And that the not to defend Facebook at all, but the volume that they have to go through is probably ridiculous. So
yeah, I definitely wouldn't want to be one of those people that has to like look at photos on Facebook and approve them. Like, when something gets flagged, like, that seems like you're just seeing the worst part of humanity. Like, oh, cool, another beheading video. This is exactly what I needed today before I clock out for lunch.
Yeah. So I mean, if you don't want to talk about it, let me know, but am I allowed to ask about the business aspect of what you guys do? Because I know that,
absolutely,
that you guys, so tell me about, like, were you guys acquired recently? Like, can you talk about talk about that as much or as little as you are comfortable, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, part of the Hard Times, like, it was never meant to be anything, like that. I can't stress that enough, that like it was started with Matt and I and $800, and that was just to get like some form of WordPress up, and us trying to figure out what anything was, and how the internet works for posting content.
Right. And
so we did a lot of learning along the way. And then as the site grew in popularity, then it was like, all right, how do we monetize this to get ads and stuff like that? And Matt was able to go full time to do Hard Time stuff because he had a decent living situation where it allowed him a little bit more freedoms. And so eventually we started to get offers of like acquiring us from other things, and we'd see the offer and we'd be like, no, like, and then the people would tell us like their vision for what they want to do. It's like, oh, we'll put out 50 articles a day about why you need to put an onion in your sock. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? That's not what we want to be doing, like, and so eventually we were approached.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, in some sense that it sounds like a stupid plan, but in some sense it's still got to feel kind of good to know that you made something that people are interested in.
It definitely gave us the idea of like, okay, people see value in this, so let's make, since we aren't looking to sell. By no means do we need to sell or do we want to sell. At least now we can hold out until something legit comes along. And so we were lucky enough to put out a book, which I think helped us, publicly, like kind of our stock went up, because a major publishing house, put investment in us, and we put out a book. And then a couple months later, we were approached by a company called Project M. They own Revolver magazine and Inked, and they're kind of a media business. And the owner of that is a guy named Enrique, and he made some money in the stock market, like in hedge funds and stuff like that. I don't know exactly what he does because I'm not a money guy, but he's kind of like a genius in that way of thinking about money. Okay. And he is just this lifelong metalhead dude, so he's got crazy tattoos and he's kind of a maniac, and he's not a professional dude, like guy, like talking to him, he's swearing and he's like, I don't know what the fuck is going on, like he's the type of guy that you would fit at hard times, basically.
When you say, just so you know, when you're saying that, I mean no disrespect to him at all, but when you were describing him, I picture the guy from Silicon Valley, the investor guy.
The one, the Trace Thomas guy, like that guy?
Yeah, or the guy who's just he's
this guy fucks, that one?
Yeah, that guy. Yep. That guy who drives all the Lamborghinis, and he's just kind of like a train wreck, but somehow is super successful.
Yeah, a little bit. You could that would be a good parallel. Probably the closest proxy to the Silicon Valley world, where Matt would be Richard and I would probably be Guilfoyle, because I also have an upside down cross tattoo.
There you go.
But so they approached us, and their vision for the site was, so we absorbed into a bigger company where I became a full-time employee for this company. I have healthcare now. We got a decent amount of money and also ownership in the bigger company as well. So, and when it was another one of those things of like, well, do we want to sell to this person? And we went and looked at his social media, and he's sharing Hard Times articles from like 2 years prior. So it's like, oh, this guy likes the Hard Times. It wasn't ever a thing of he just recently got turned on to it and said, oh, I can make this into $1 million venture. I'm going to fucking do this and run it into the ground. He was a fan of this, wanted to be a part of it, and also has resources that allowed us to do new things and better things and produce more content and not worry about, okay, this site might not exist tomorrow and we're going to go back to loading trucks. So it has been beneficial in a lot of ways, and he was basically the perfect guy to be the person that bought us out, because he has had not only is he not interested in the editorial process, like he's like, if we ever have a question for him, like, why are you asking me? That's your, like, just go do it. Like that's like his whole thing is like, you guys know what you're doing, just do it. And so that has been great, because there's been no intrusion from the bosses being like, all right, now we got to make sure you write all these great things about, Five-Finger Death Punch, like what? So
that's great, because it sounds like he basically was a fan first and just wants to continue being a fan, but wants to help it grow without sticking his nose into it, really, like in a bad way.
Yeah, that is basically how it is, and he doesn't want to lose money on the venture at the end of the day. So there are certain things we're doing, but that's like, we never had a good merch system before, so now we're going to be investing in better merch designs and stuff like that. And hopefully that is a return on the investment, because monetization of online media is tough. No businesses are really making money, and people are like, oh, COVID must have been great for you guys because everybody's at home. It's like actually complete opposite. Like advertisers fled the internet for some reason during COVID. So it's actually been more damaging to any smaller print places, not just the Hard Times, but any online property. So if you have comedy sites that you enjoy, now is the time to be going to their website and clicking on their things and just interacting with their post, because that's what helps them more than a like on Instagram, So,
right.
But it has been beneficial for us in a lot of ways. And it's good for me as a 36-year-old skateboarder who have health insurance while running a stupid comedy website. So I can go skateboarding and be like, fucking fuck up my ankle. Then I won't go bankrupt. So this is nice.
Sounds like a pretty good setup.
Yeah. I'm not complaining.
And then you guys, so you have the Hard Times, like the main site, and you have a bunch of, you have like Hard Drive. It's called Hard Drive, right?
Right. And so, yeah, and that's the other thing. Hard Drive was not acquired by Project M. So we still fully own all of Hard Drive. So it's kind of two separate companies while still being, it's a very weird business deal, but we could turn around and sell Hard Drive and get another payday. Who knows? Maybe it'll happen. That would be cool if it did, but it might never. But Project M, the company that bought it, they're like, we don't do video game stuff. We don't really know it. So you guys can keep it. We'll just take the Hard Times part of it. Wow.
That is pretty interesting. It could be a very good, that could turn out very well for you.
There's a lot of money in video games. So we're crossing our fingers.
And how about the podcast? Is that, you have a couple different podcasts. Is that through Hard Times, or are those just your own properties?
Yeah, so it's all through Hard Times, and we've been doing them for a while. There's the Hard Times podcast, which is Matt and I, and we interview people of note. And we have another podcast called Fanboys, where listeners will send them music and they will listen, and they're required to say at least one nice thing about it, but then they basically just say their truthful thoughts, which are usually not as kind. And then there's Up the Blunks, which is hosted by two young black men, and it's about the black experience in punk and what they've experienced, the coded racism or whatever, and how they, and also them just kind of bullshitting and being super funny dudes. It's not a serious podcast at all, but they do talk about what has affected them and being like the only black guy at a show sometimes and how that makes them feel. But it is one of the funnier listens it's appointment listening for me. And what else is there? There's a Horror Times podcast, so they've watched some horror stuff, and then Coward Hour, a couple of comedians bullshitting, and then the newest one is one that I just started hosting with a couple of buddies called Vert Button, where we rewatch some old skateboard videos and extensively break them down. So a 30-minute video becomes a 2.5-hour podcast of the intricacies, the music choices, how good a backside 180 was, it gets very, very, very nerdy and specific. And that one's called Vert Button.
And I listened to I think it was actually the second episode on the Zero video. Oh, Jesus.
Misled
Youth. I have to say, I think I prefer Thrill of It All, because it was right on the verge of everything getting, not that I could keep up with anything in Thrill of It All, especially Jamie Thomas, but when Misled Youth came out, I was like, yeah, fuck this. Like, it was just too ridiculous. And at the time, but when I watch it now, I look at it, I'm like, I thought, compared to what people are doing now, a lot of that shit looks small,
right?
Which is crazy to think about. But yeah, I mean, the one that really, and maybe it was just because I was older, so when it came out, it was more, I was more kind of in my prime years. Thrill of It All was my, but I enjoyed the podcast for sure, and it made me go back and rewatch those videos, which was I hadn't seen in a long time.
Yeah, I mean, Thrill of It All was one of the first videos I had, and I mean, we will eventually talk about it on Vert Button, I'm sure, but the fact that the final trick in the video is a slam, it's not even a make, it's the leap of faith, which was so iconic, that's just like,
it's ridiculous.
I mean, in the fact that I think it's skate stopped now. Like it's designed so you can't skate it, but multiple people went back to it and dudes broke their legs. You know, people like are, you know, legend would have it that they're like crippled now, you know, like from trying the leap of faith.
I was going to say, has anyone successfully done that?
I mean, I bet some shit that Jaws has done is higher and bigger than the leap of faith, but nobody, to my knowledge, ever successfully landed the actual leap of faith.
Right.
Jamie Thomas.
I mean, he basically
his board.
Yeah, I was gonna say he basically. I mean, if the board didn't break, I think he landed it. But
I mean, I really feel like, what can the human body withstand, and can you actually jump from that high? And like I think Jaws has done some stuff higher, but he's shaped so like such a strange human. He's super skinny and long, and when he does these high drops, like his body contorts in itself, and he seems to like disappear like some sort of cartoon character like into the ground.
Yeah.
And but I feel like, but I don't know. But also, Jamie Thomas is a bigger guy.
Yeah, like I'm not super familiar with Jaws. I've seen some of his stuff, but the leap of faith is crazy because there's not much of a. I mean, it's almost like going off a high loading dock. Like there's not a lot of what's the word I'm looking? There's not a lot of like distance involved. Whereas like, you know, that usually sort of kind of mellows out the landing. Like, I mean, obviously it's still high, but when there's a grade involved, it's like, I think it makes the impact, it lessens the impact. Or at least that's the way I always thought of it. But
I think if you pulled 100 skateboarders and said, all right, ollie off of this, this high of an object, we're either going to put 8 stairs here, or we're going to have a loading dock that's 8 stairs high. People would say, give me the stairs. Right. So I have like this speed and like knowledge in my head where I can just project what I have to do.
Yes.
Where if you're just going to ollie off of like you just want me to ollie up into the air and then straight down, like it's psychotic.
It's like a Roadrunner cartoon.
Yeah. Like I found some old footage of me skating off of a loading dock, and it was like shoulder high to me when I was, I don't know, 9th grade, you know, so maybe I'm taller now, and who knows how tall that loading dock actually was, but it was shoulder high at the time. And I was like, this is stupid. Like I'm going so slow.
Yep.
And I'm just like kick flipping straight up and then falling straight to the ground. Like, find me a 7 stair and let's fucking skate that, because that made way more sense to my brain now. But yeah, to your point about the leap of faith, the fact that it is a straight drop down, like you're just pushing with speed up to something that you don't have to gap out on. That's got to fuck with your head so bad.
And in my head, the landing seems, and I don't know, I've never been there. And I've only really seen it in a few like videos or whatever, or maybe some photos. But in my head, the landing almost seems like it's a little uphill, like it's got a little grade to it.
You might be right.
which to me seems like it would make even a harsher landing, but I don't know.
Well, I can definitely see, like, to the point where people have broken their legs trying it, like why they have, because of that. You approach it with like no speed because you don't have to gap out over something. So you're not going to hit and roll. You're just going to straight leg it like a fucking asshole as soon as you hit the ground. And like, there's nothing worse than that feeling of straight legging a gap that you've jumped on. Like it just destroys you. Ooh. And there's no other way you're gonna take that. So it's either you make it or you're straight legging it, and then it's going to be compound fractures that stab you in the brain.
Either way, it's crazy. So let me ask first, vert button, is that lingo that I'm not picking up on? Is that just like the fast forward button because you don't want to watch the vert sections, or is it have to do with like the vert hold on the old school TV, like on your VCR? Like what is the...
So yeah, it was lingo that came from the late 90s skateboard world where it was fully transitioning to street, but there were still vert skaters that would pop up in videos. And so the vert button was just like, oop, don't need to watch Bucky Lassick. Just let's get to Andrew Reynolds, you know, like do not need this at all. So it came from that era of skateboarding where vert was completely dead.
Yeah. I even when it wasn't dead, I don't know. I know personally, I would usually fast forward through the Vert stuff unless it was someone like exceptional, like maybe Danny Way or something. But
Right. There was a certain thing that Danny Way had that seemed better about it, but I feel like Vert is one of those things it's amazing to see in person. Like I still don't understand it, like you see Vert, but when you see it on video, you're just like, I don't know.
We can't relate to it. It's not relatable. It's like even now, I mean, maybe it's different on the West Coast, but here it's like there's one. I'm lucky enough, I guess, to live near it, but there's only really a few like full size Vert ramps around. Like there's one in Rye Airfield near me, but I don't know where else. I mean, there must be some, but they're not really accessible. Unless you're going to build one in your backyard.
Right. And it's so weird that like a Vert ramp just seems so static while like a bowl looks sick, like,
right.
I don't like, it's the same motions, but like there's something about a bowl that just is cooler than a Vert ramp but I mean, late 90s, you had the X Games and street skating looked, if you watch those old X Games, it's like street skating looks tiny and kind of weak, and they're just bailing kickflips over 4 stairs, and then you looked at Vert. To the average viewer that doesn't skateboard, you'd be like, well, that Vert stuff is far more impressive. I would rather watch that than some guy fuck up on a board slide. And I still don't even really, like, you watch Street League or something like that, and these dudes have these tricks dialed in on lines that would make full video parts in the past. And you're just like, but you watch it and you're just like, yeah, so what? Show it to me in the streets.
Well, in a lot of that stuff, even like the quote unquote street parts and stuff, and unless like the X Games real streets contests are pretty cool. Like that stuff's cool to watch because it's actually is real street. But the other stuff that's like park or I don't know, man. It's almost like watching a video game. It's too unbelievable, a lot of it, and like too dialed and too perfect. I do like watching some of the like the Vans series, like the bowl, like the it's the Vans parks, like the bowls and stuff that they make, because it's just cool to watch them flow around and do the stuff. But
right, and then some like 16-year-old launches some hip that it's like wasn't meant to be skated, and it's like a football field long.
Yeah,
and they're
ridiculous.
Like, how the fuck did he do that?
Yeah, but I think it goes back to it is still unrelatable. How far back? I got 2 questions on that. How far back does your skate video knowledge go? Like, what was your first skate video? Like, at what point?
1996, Welcome to Hell was my first skate video.
That's a good one.
Yeah. So that video, I mean, I could tell you trick by trick what happens, like from memory almost, like I still have my original VHS copy of that. Like when I die, like when I'm cremated, like cremate me with my VHS copy of Welcome to Hell. I want my ashes to be spread with that on me. And then, but anything, I don't know, skateboarding is so weird in that way where it's like the year you start skateboarding, everything before that's like, okay, yeah, I've heard of it, but I don't care.
Right.
So for the most part, I didn't really check out that many videos before 1996 other than like video days. And then, you watch some of the Powell videos and see how corny they are.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, there's a lot more weird acting in these than there is actually skateboarding.
Yeah, there's some weird stuff in there, but they're worth checking out just for the, history of it, I guess. But
exactly. But yeah, for the most part, 1996 to the mid 2000s was where most of my skateboard media was consumed. I probably stopped watching skate videos like with intent around like 2008, and then it was just like when somebody told me to check something out, like, and now I'm like getting back into it more, like just watched the Death Wish video on the Thrasher site and just shit blew my mind,
Right.
Like these dudes, like if you thought Misled Youth had big handrails, then
ridiculous. Yeah, I see so many Instagram clips these days. It's like I don't feel like I need to search out a video. It's the funny thing is, I think. What year did Misled Youth come out? Because it's
99.
Yeah, I didn't stop skating at that point, and it's funny because I actually worked at a skate video company, but I kind of stopped paying attention right around that time because it was just getting so crazy. It was like. It started to become kind of like white noise. It was just like, it's crazy. Yeah, I have no chance of ever keeping up with any of this stuff. I mean, not that I did before, but like, I think you always had this like little like, you had this little, I don't know, like notion in the back of your head that like maybe one day I could be almost good enough to,
yeah, I could get like a sponsored by like a shop or something like that. That'd be
maybe.
Cool.
And that kind of kept you like trying to like stay on top of what was going on. And then once you realize it's not happening, like you lose that little piece of you, and then you just go out and you're doing it, and you don't care what the newest thing is because it's fucking crazy. Like you just know it's crazy, especially once the internet came along. It was just like fucking, it's insane. But there's some old videos at some point, like some of those older New Deal videos and H Street videos. Like I will say some of them are like ridiculously long, like especially some of the H Street videos. It's like, Shackle Me Not or something, I think is like an hour and a half long. But there's some classic like Matt Hensley parts. Like I don't know if you got.
Oh yeah.
Like Hensley's like the tricks aren't that sick. Like for now, but back then they were pretty sick, and like just his style like it was just like good to watch. Like him, like Jason Lee, Ed Templeton, like obviously like any of the older Ed Templeton stuff's pretty fucking sick too. But I'd be interested to see like what since it was before I think any of you guys really started skating. It'd be interesting to see what your take on that shit would be. But
right, yeah, I mean, we definitely plan with the podcast on going back to watching videos. Like right now, for the first few episodes, we're doing it monthly since the episodes are going to be so long. Okay. You know, I was
going to say, where's the next one? I was waiting for it. I was looking for it.
Well, we realize like that. People can listen to these in 30-minute chunks and get through it, as opposed to completely wiping out their podcast listening by releasing a 2.5-hour episode every week. We didn't want to do that to people, and we're busy, and this is just a hobby to do this. But going back to like video days is definitely going to happen, because like Gons does Wallenberg in that first guy to ollie that, and he does it with no ramp. He pushes from the street, and if anybody ever has the chance to go look at the size of the Wallenberg 4 and to think that he pushed up to that and ollied it, it's fucking insane. Like I lived in San Francisco and I'd skate the flat ground around there by the basketball courts just to warm up on days.
Yeah.
And the stairs would just be behind me, and it's like skating next to the Eiffel Tower. You're like, yeah, there it is. You know, like
I actually went there once, and it's huge.
Yeah. On my best day, I've tried to explain it to people that haven't seen it. On my best day of I don't think that I completely suck at skateboarding. On my best day of skateboarding, in my prime, let's say I have the balls to try it and step to it, I couldn't clear the third stair. With a ramp rolling in, I wouldn't clear the third stair, and people fucking switch backside flip it. It's fucking insane. I mean, Frank Gerwer's kickflip over it, he pushed from the street and kickflipped it, and it's sloppy as hell, but it's so sick.
Yeah, I was gonna say, didn't someone kickflip the 4 at some point?
Yeah. Frank Gerwer was the first person to kickflip the 4, but with no ramp. But now people set up a ramp there, to roll in and get the speed, because it's a tight hallway, and they built a handicap ramp so you couldn't push from the street anymore. And so it's like a different setup. So you can't do it the old school way of pushing into it anymore. So you need the roll in, but it also cleaned it up. And yeah, it's still absolutely goddamn insane that anybody steps to it and it like tests the limits of what the human body can take. And like, I think Chris Cole took, 90 tries to 360 flip it in like some Zero video.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine that he's going to like die at age 55 and the doctor will just be like, yeah, his bones disintegrated, like he tried to 360 flip Wallenberg for an hour and a half. What do you expect?
Oh my
you
God.
Can't do that.
Dude.
Yeah. There was a Thrasher event that they did there while I was living in San Francisco called like the Buster Bale, and it was at Waldenberg, and they just had a bunch of people just sessioning the stairs, and that was like, I mean, I had already realized by this point like I'm never going to be a sponsored skateboarder, but I got to see like, oh, this is the level of pro that is truly a pro. Like Chris Cole backside 360'd it, got wheel bite when he landed, fell backwards, hit his head to the point where you could feel his head hit the ground. Then he got up and landed it next try. It's like, you just smashed your head off the fucking ground, dude. Like what the hell? Go to the hospital. And then he switched frontside flipped it. It like doesn't make sense to me. But yeah, that's the level of that was 12 years ago. Like the level of pro skateboarding has advanced from there. I don't know.
It's crazy. I don't know. But what can you like if you're gonna tell someone? Because what you guys have done is like you said, you didn't start off with the intention of making it into something, but you obviously have made it into something, and I think most of the really cool, good stuff that ends up being successful, typically, at least I think the best stuff, typically people say that, it's just like, we weren't really trying to make it into anything big and successful. And it ends up being that way. Why do you think that is?
I think it's because you can tell that people are putting the time into it with like some sort of actual thought and intention, as opposed like that isn't related to I'm going to cash out, where it's like, I feel like people are smart enough to sniff out cash grabs in a way. And it just turns you off when you see something that's organic and natural and it has an energy to it, and people gravitate towards that. And I think the only way to do that is to be legitimate. Like the reason, like when we did the hard times, we were coming from shows. Like we knew the crust punks that we were making fun of. We are straight edge guys. We know the specifics of making fun of straight edge. That isn't, just going to be some stupid trope. It's going to be specific to the life experience, and people be like, oh my God, that happens to me. I thought I was the only one. And you can relate to it in that way. And then you get more people that are, I thought I was the only one. And then you have a large audience of people that think they were the only one. And I think it just builds from there. And so whatever if you want to pursue something creative, think about it in the sense of, would I want to do this with no money coming in? Like, is this something that I would just want to do and think about at night because I just want to put it out there? Like throughout the entire existence of the hard times, first 4.5 years, there was no money at all. It was just, I'm doing this because I want to be doing this. And if people stop reading it, I will still do it until somebody tells me to stop because, nobody's going to be around anymore. Like the lights are off, the building's burned down. You can stop now, Bill.
It's basically, it's going to eat you alive if you're not doing it. It's going to kind of gnaw at you and until you get, you get these headlines probably popping in your head. And if you don't get them down, it's just going to like drive you crazy.
Exactly. And I think that is like, so whatever think about what you want to be doing. And, even if it's something like, oh, I want to I want to do baking stuff like that, and I want to make these certain things in a certain way that I haven't seen done before. Like, it doesn't matter that you don't own something that's written up in magazines or whatever. You're just doing it. You take a bite of it, throw it away because you wanted to go through the process of it, and that's what you wanted to learn. And there's been so many things that I've learned through the hard times that was unintentional, like, oh, this obstacle has come up, let's figure out what we need to do and adapt. And now I have that under my tool belt that I can use for future projects, and then I see how when people reach out to the hard times, so they want to be a part of it, I see the mistakes that they make. So if I were ever to be like, oh, there's this TV writing job that's open, I want to apply for that. Like, what can I do that will get me noticed, that but I won't make the same mistake that these people have made when they've reached out to the hard times. Like, it's just a lot of little things that build up. And so whatever creative thing you're doing, just make sure you want to be doing it. That's all.
Right.
If it feels like work, then maybe that's not it, and if you're doing it just for, you see, I guess that's talking earlier.
Right. The motivations. Yeah. I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, like talking earlier where my parents' dreams for me were being an electrician and a plumber. Like, yeah, I'd probably have a lot more money. I'd probably own a house somewhere on the South Shore of Massachusetts. I'd have a work van with a dope ass pipe rack on the top and stuff like that. I'd have an extension ladder that would like knock your dick in the dirt. I'm talking 24-footer here, in no bullshit extension ladder. I'm talking fiberglass. The real deal.
Right.
And I'd have like full Milwaukee toolkit. I'm not fucking around with Black & Decker. I'm going full Milwaukee. So I'd be decked out, but at the same time, I wouldn't go home at night and think like, damn, I wish I could be doing plumbing for free right now. Like, oh, I wish I had some of the old plumbing shit that when I first fucking started, like it, yeah. It would be just, oh, I'm getting up, and in no shame to anybody that does do that, but in the creative realm, when you want to pursue those projects, you have to want to do it.
Yeah.
Because it consumes you, as opposed to just, this is a means to an end sort of situation.
Exactly. Yeah. I am curious to know how you think about the fact that obviously the headlines and the stories you guys write are going to resonate with a certain group of people, but the fact that it seems to resonate with, like I was saying earlier, just like regular people, just like civilians, like, yeah, like why do you think that is? Or are they just like secret civilians?
So I think a lot. Think about it this way. Like, do you follow Return to the Pit on like Instagram or anything?
I know of them. I actually know. I do. My wife is pretty good friends with the guy who does that. But
the Rev.
Yeah.
So like when I will see these old show photos from Massachusetts, 2000 to current day, and I see these packed photos of the ICC church, like American Nightmare is playing, and you can't, it's standing room only, and people are going insane. And it's like, who are all these people? Like, I don't recognize a single one of these guys. And I grew up in Massachusetts, and I thought Massachusetts was small, and I don't know who any of these people are. So there's no way all of those people are still doing punk shit or whatever. Right. But they're just going to be your normal dudes. Like, maybe a lot of them became cops. Maybe a lot of them are security guards or something like that. And they had that brief period of 3 years where they went to shows, and they can still relate to some of the stuff that the hard times is. And then they, show their significant other, be like, oh, this is funny. And they go, what are you talking about? And like, oh yeah, I was punk once, so I do think there's that element. And then, we do branch out where we'll just do like a political headline where we're just basically just being more on the left, and people will just relate to, yes, Donald Trump sucks, and like that's an accurate statement. So therefore it is funny. So I think a lot of it is that, but I do think there's a lot of people that just
They
the
dipped in and
civilians will
out.
surprise you.
Yeah, they dipped in and out just long enough to pick up enough knowledge to get the joke.
Yeah.
It's
And if you look back on so many, I love when I go back to Massachusetts, and it seems like as much as things change, that there still isn't where I'll like get out of, like I'll be walking around near like Park Street or something like that, and there's the dude in baggy jeans and like the white tank top, and he's got a thin gold necklace around, and he's got like his red hair spiked a little bit, and you're like, whoa, this guy, like you're still this guy, you know, like
yeah.
I thought this guy disappeared in high school, but like you're still this dude, man. Like, wow, that's amazing.
Those people are still around.
Yeah, their cousin owns a bar in Somerville, and he gives them a fucking discount on beer when he goes there. You know, it's cool.
And maybe I guess you're right. Like, it kind of reminds me of that whole. I don't know if you're aware of the Have Heart shows that went down a couple of years ago or last year.
Yeah.
What the fuck year was that? 2019,
Yeah,
I guess. Last year. I mean, they played for 10,000. Like, they played an outdoor show for 10,000 people in Worcester. Have Heart. Like,
right.
how does, you know? I guess it's the same idea. There was enough people in and out, just enough at certain points that they you know, were able to draw that, and maybe those same people are supporting the hard times.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, and that's the thing. I bet if you went to that, you know, you go to shows and everybody kind of looks the same, you know, at certain times. Like I'll go to the skate park now, or I'll be at a skate spot, and every skateboarder is kind of looking the same with like slacks that are cuffed once or twice. They got like a long sleeve tee on, and it's just like, oh yeah, this is just the 35 and above kit for skateboarders at this point. But I bet if you went to that Have Heart show, you'd look around and be like, a lot of these people, how did a lot of these people hear this? They don't seem like they should be here, you know?
Right.
And then you would see like the standard dudes that look like, you know, they would have been in Boston circa 2007 and going nuts to Have Heart, you know,
Right.
But it all adapts. But I guarantee if you went to that show, you would think you were just at like a music festival, you know, be like, who the fuck are these people?
Yeah. No, you're right. Because I actually went to that one. I was filming, you know, because I was filming with Sonny. I was actually filming him filming, for the doc that I did, and it was just like that. You look around, you're like, who did you bring your kids? Like, why are you here? Like,
Yeah,
you know, it's the minivans, like, you know, idling around the corner, and just, you know, it's like, it was strange, and I was probably one of the older dudes there, but there was people definitely that you wouldn't see them on the street and be like, oh yeah, hardcore dude, or yeah, this dude must get down to Have Heart. Get down. There's no, that's just, did I just sound very old when I said that?
you were the guy that people were like, what is he doing here?
Yeah,
Like,
well,
does this guy get down to Have Heart?
I mean, oh man, I should have looked the most out of place, but I don't think I did, or maybe I did. But yeah, it was a weird experience. So it seems like, you know, maybe there's more punk people out there than I realized, and in the long run, hopefully that's a good thing. So
I think that's what it comes down to, is that it's all surprising how many how big this actually is, but people just come in and out so fast for their various reasons that you don't realize it, you know? Like, it's, you have your core people that you've became friends with, you know, you have lasting relationships with, but then there's the 500 other people that were at that show that who knows where they disappeared into New Hampshire, or, you know, wherever, or they went off to college and they got a finance job somewhere, and who knows?
There are a lot of those people. Yeah.
Yeah.
So on a similar but completely unrelated note, I have to say, what the fuck, dude? Have you watched Wayne yet? Because Matt tore that thing apart, and he's completely wrong. He is wrong.
I have not watched it yet. I have not had the chance. Matt and I do disagree a lot on media. He was just as a
Did I mention that? Did I mention that it was a hardcore kid who did it from Brockton?
You did mention that. So as a litmus test for what Matt likes, he thought The Other Missy on Netflix starring David Spade was the funniest movie of 2020. So
okay, so there you go.
Yeah, so that's what you're dealing with now. I can't say one way or the other because I haven't watched either. I haven't watched Wayne or The Other Missy, but I could just tell by the promotional materials for The Other Missy that it's not for me. So,
well, I'll say this:
I can't pass judgment on anything yet, but I do still plan on watching it.
I'll say this: if you, so for me, I watched the trailer and like 10 seconds in, I was like, I have to watch this. This looks amazing. If you don't like the trailer, you probably won't like it. But and I do remember him. I think he compared it to Scott Pilgrim. I get the comparison. I think it's a lot better than that. I wasn't really super fan of Scott Pilgrim. Maybe you compared it to him, but I don't know.
Yeah, I've never seen Scott Pilgrim. What he was describing seemed like what Scott Pilgrim was.
It's as far as the violence goes, it's definitely a bit comic booky. I mean, it's a little bit, it's over the top and a little ridiculous on the violence side of things as to what happens and how they just kind of move on from it. And it's like, no, you would probably be dead or arrested or something. You know what I mean? It's not believable, but if we're going to go with just shit that's believable, then, you know, we're severely going to limit what we can watch.
Right.
But so in that respect, yeah, but I don't know. I give it a shot.
I mean, I was born in Brockton, so I by law I need to at least check out the show just to make sure.
So there's there's definitely a recognizable guy. You would recognize this guy from other TV shows probably, but the way they have him decked out, you're like, that's a fucking landlord from Brockton. Like he's got like I don't even know what it's called, but like he just looks like a guy from an older guy from the neighborhood. He's got this like leather jacket with like, maybe it's like a members only jacket looking thing. And he's got like the gold chain. He's got like the uniform from like the townie, like Boston townie, like uniform. He's walking his pit bull. It's like,
thinks he looks slick as hell, but really just looks kind of corny.
Yeah, exactly. It was like dead on. It's dead on. But yeah, I don't know. It's worth checking out. So yeah. I don't want to keep you too long. Anything else you want to say, or you want to just plug some shit and get out? What do you want to do here?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say that if you're listening to this, continue to support the small. There's obviously supporting small businesses is a thing, but like what people don't realize is online media is a small business in a lot of ways. So say, you like The Onion, like don't just interact with The Onion on Instagram or Twitter, like go to The Onion's website and read them. That's what helps these sites stay alive, because that is how they monetize things. We're in an area of the internet where you no longer have your bookmarks on the top of your thing. You just go to Facebook and like you get things through there, and it's prevented people from going to the websites that they used to go to just to check out. I remember having my bookmarks, and then I'd wake up in the morning and I'd go across the 5 to 10 websites that I like to see what the news is, what the comedy thing is. And the way social media works is it's tougher to do that. So the smaller comedy sites they live off of clicks. So that includes the Hard Times. So anybody that wants to read that's at thehardtimes.net. And there's the podcast too. I recommend Vert Button the most because that's the skateboarding nerd in me. And that's the one I would like people to check out the most because, skateboarding, it's what's led to everything. Without skateboarding, nothing exists.
That's a perfect way to end. Thanks a lot, Bill.
Thank you.
All right. I'll talk to you later. All right. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Bill Conway. If you're enjoying these podcasts, please just reach out and let me know what you're thinking. Feel free to leave a comment or a review or a rating in iTunes or Spotify. That would be great. That helps a lot. Also, don't forget to check out the 6-part Don't Stand in Line docuseries. It's now actually available up on Vimeo on demand, so it might be a little bit easier to get that straight to your TV than through Gumroad, but it's still up on Gumroad as well, and we are working on a couple other cool ways to get that to you. You can learn more about that and everything else we're doing at codecprojects.com, codecprojects.com. You can also find us on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube. See you guys next week with artist and designer John Contino.